to the Flightcast, a place where opinions aren't right or wrong, and where we can agree or disagree about movies, TV, and other assorted media because it's all subjective. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me here on, what is a Tuesday at the time of me recording this? Alright, here's the deal. For those of you who do not have Patreon, who are not subscribed to patreon.com/theflightcast, and didn't hear my episode of Flight Speed yesterday, here's the deal. Last couple of weeks, obviously, there's been some scheduling difficulties, if you will, where this actually started like a month ago with Andor, because once I started trying to do Flightbox episodes of that show, and it's like, hey, I can't do 3 episodes a day, or 3 episodes like in one day, and then get the episode out on time, so that was already throwing my schedule off, and I was just like, screw it, can't do it. And then on top of that, it messed with my schedule as far as doing a final episode for that show. So I recapped that during our last feedback session, if you will, which was called Friday Flight. And then there were a couple of Fridays, most notably, there was the one Friday where I had to go into work really early, and so that threw that schedule off. And then last Friday, I went and saw Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, and didn't get home until much later than I had anticipated, and so that threw that off, which is why there wasn't a feedback episode last week. I did get everybody's emails that did send those in. Thank you very much for all of that. But yeah, so just the schedule has gone haywire yet again. Seriously, it's like, can I find some peace? Can I find some consistency? Can I find a way to actually do these things in a timely fashion? And you know what? I think I have. Honestly, I took the weekend and I was like, okay, figure this shit out, Ray. Figure it out. Come on. Get it going. Get it under control. What are you going to do? So, here's the deal. Here's what we're doing, okay? Tuesdays, this show, right? The main show, Flightcast, right? Give me a day, give me that Monday to process shit, right? Monday, right off the bat, it's just like, yeah, that's compressed, right? And there's not always news. There's not always shit to talk about. There's not even really a whole lot to talk about in this particular episode. That's why I'm talking a lot here at the beginning about figuring out the schedule, to be honest with you. And this isn't going to be a terribly long episode. Seriously, it's not going to be that long of an episode. Just wait and see. But yeah, Tuesdays, main show. Thursdays, flight box or flight review. That's going to be like the catch-all day. Like, okay, those shows are going to happen, right? And that'll work because when Ironheart kicks off here on June 24th, that's going to be another like 3-episode drop each night, right? And if they do what they did last time, with respect to, we're going to drop it Tuesday at 9 o'clock, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, great. So that should give me Wednesday and then Thursday, if necessary, to watch all 3 episodes and then talk about them, right? Because I'm definitely covering Ironheart. That's going to happen. It's absolutely going to happen. There'll be episodes of Flightbox for that. But Thursdays for that show, and Thursdays for, anything else that I might cover topside in that particular show. And then the feedback show, which is now going to go back to being Flight Chat. Yes, I know. I know I've changed the name for it a handful of times. But those of you that have listened to me for this long, those of you that are part of our little group here, our little niche podcasting group here, if you will. I think that's what Anthony called it in his one email. Anthony Dorsey, I think he called this a niche podcast, which I thought that was, I took that, I was flattered by that description, to be honest with you. But those of you that are a part of this group, you know what this is. You probably remember when it was called the Hexagon and it was part of the main show, and those were like 4-hour-long episodes of the show. You remember when I originally changed it to Flight Chat. If you were part of Patreon, then you know when it was Friday Flight, and it wasn't even a feedback show. That was just me getting drunk off of beer and spouting shit off on Patreon because, I can curse on Patreon. I don't follow cable rules there. I follow, theatrically released rules there in that regard with respect to language. And so now we're just going back to Flight Chat, and it's going to be weekends, right? So, Saturday, Sunday, right? So it could be Saturday, could be Sunday. I will aim for Saturday, right? But yeah, if you just send in your feedback by Friday, or I get Saturday midnight, Eastern Daylight Time, right? So I'll have the weekend, right? So anything that comes in past Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, anything like that, that'll get punted to the next particular show, unless I record later in the day and I have an opportunity to do it, in which case, I don't know. If you want to be certain to get your feedback in, for a particular episode, just make sure to send it before Saturday, right? Send it before Saturday. If you send it on Saturday or Sunday, you're taking a bit of a risk. I may or may not get to it. But before Saturday should be pretty safe. in that regard, right? So that's how the schedule is going to go. So 3 episodes, like 3 records, like every week, if you will, right? There's going to be the main show on Tuesdays, whatever catch-all show, Flight Box, Flight Review, whatever it is I decide to do on Thursdays, and then Flight Chat, the feedback show on weekends. There we go. That should do it. That ought to flip and do it at this point. Hopefully, we'll see. Yeah, real life is taxing when it comes to trying to deal with this shit, and I don't hate my job. I actually really enjoy my job. Like I enjoy what I do. It's just timing and distance and all this other shit just really just throws things for a loop in reality. I'm not suffering. This is all first world problems. Seriously, there are people out there in this country and outside this country, of course, that have it way worse than I do. This is a luxury that I get to do this, seriously, that I get to, have an audience of however many people that even want to listen to what I say every week, and I greatly appreciate all of you that have listened to me for this long. So thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much for supporting my little podcast endeavor here, my niche podcast endeavor, if you will. And I appreciate it greatly, for sure. So there you have it. That is going to be the schedule for the foreseeable future going forward. And all of those shows, of course, can be found at theflightcast.com or wherever you get your podcast. It could be Apple Podcasts. It could be the Flightcast YouTube channel, which is where these episodes get posted every time a new one drops. It could be on Spotify. It could be on Pandora. You could find the Flightcast all of those places and anywhere else that you podcatch, if you will, whether it's Overcast or any other apps that you might use. And of course, I mentioned earlier a few times, patreon.com/theflightcast. Those of you who are members of that Patreon, thank you so much for your support. I hope that you've been enjoying the bonus content that has been there. If you did hear my episode of Flight Speed that I posted yesterday, then you also know about the animated franchise that I'd been teasing a couple of weeks ago that I've been collecting, that I really want to start watching and getting into, because I have largely blind bought this particular animated franchise, if you will. And it's a unique franchise, a very intriguing one. And once people find out what it is, I wonder how many of you will be intrigued to hear my thoughts on this particular animated franchise. It is a storied one. It is one that many collectors have set their sights on, those who are physical media collectors. It's definitely one that spans a good amount of movies, some more difficult and pricier to find than others, if you will. But it's something I've been wanting to watch for a long time, and I'm going to dive into it head first, and I'm going to try and watch them in release order, if you will. So stay tuned for those episodes of Flight Review that will get posted to Patreon here pretty soon. And then I've also got to do my Pixar catch-up, because there's still 8 or 9 Pixar movies that I have not watched, and I'm pretty sure I know the next pair that I'm going to watch. It's a movie and its sequel that I have not seen before. Yep, there you have it. So if you paid any attention to any of the Pixar movies that I have watched, this is a movie and its sequel that I have not watched before, but I own both of them in glorious steelbook. Blind buys. I've done a lot of blind buying, but again, with respect to movies, TV, and other sort of media, like I've been saying, you already have an idea of what you're going to like and what you're not going to like. And so for me, even when I blind buy things, it's not because I'm taking a shot. It's because I have an interest in seeing whatever that is, and I'm probably going to like it. The question is, how much am I going to like it? And I went through this one of my first episodes recently of Flight Review that I did in the last, this year, was Hellraiser. I bought the Quartet of Torment, the special Arrow Films box set, it's a gorgeously haunting, disgusting box set. It's not that disgusting, but it's awesome. It's really well done, and I bought it because it was half off. They were having an Arrow sale at Barnes & Noble, and I was like, I've always been curious about those movies since, people told me, hey, it's Event Horizon borrowed off of that, and I love Event Horizon. It's one of my favorite, horror movies, if you will. And so, not having seen none of those Hellraiser movies, I just bought it half off and was like, hey, let's try this out. And sure enough, I posted my thoughts, and it is not a purchase that I regret. I'll say that. If you want my full thoughts, you can go check that out. That Flight Review episode about the Hellraiser Quartet of Torment, my thoughts on the first 4 Hellraiser films. But I blind bought that and I wasn't disappointed. I blind bought Purple Rain and wasn't disappointed. I watched that and reviewed that on last month for the anniversary of Prince's passing, if you will. So, I've got a lot of blind buys that I need to like watch and review, and more than likely it's all stuff that all of you, many of you, more than likely have seen, including this animated franchise that I'm talking about. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for episodes of Flight Review on Patreon.com for that, and also stay tuned for some episodes of Flight Report because we're getting closer and closer to the release of Superman on July 11th, which means I've got some Superman comics to read. I got to do James Gunn's homework assignment. I got to read them. I do. I need to read them. I need to review them. And I need to talk about them on Flight Report. I haven't done an episode of Flight Report in like what, couple years? I don't think it's been how long it's been. I think what was the last one I did? Was it Spider-Man? Brand New Day and One More Day? It might have been. Might have been the last episode of Flight Report that I did where I review comics. So stay tuned for some DC loaded goodness with respect to that in the next few weeks or so as we get closer and closer to that July 11th release date for Superman. But tons of other bonus content available as well at patreon.com/theflightcast. Hope that all of you that are subscribed enjoy it. Thank you so much for your support. And if you were interested in any of that bonus content, go ahead and go over to patreon.com/theflightcast and sign up to be a flight officer, and that will get you access to all of it indeed. All right, so like I said, this wasn't going to be a long episode because there wasn't like a ton of news that's happened in like the last week or so. But I did want to talk about Mission Impossible Final Reckoning for a bit because I didn't do a flight review episode for that because of all the other scheduling ridiculousness that happened that I talked about. But I did want to give my thoughts on this because a few of you did ask me on threads and I didn't really convey what I thought about the film. I mean, obviously I enjoyed it. You know, it was funny because when I got to the theater, I went sometime after work, and I went and had some lunch beforehand, and I kind of misjudged my time a little bit, and I got to the parking garage that I normally met behind my theater right when like it was starting. And you know how it is with movies, right? It's always 10, 15 minutes, maybe sometimes more worth of previews. So once you get there, like at the time that it starts, you've got about 5-10 minutes to do what you got to do, right? And I parked in a garage next to this Jeep that was kind of oversized, and so I didn't have a whole lot of room to clear. But the guy that was in the Jeep, like he was nice enough to like he was standing there and he was like, "You got enough clearance? You got enough room to get out, sir?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm all right." And so I get out of the car, lock the car, right, and we're both walking out of the parking garage, like in the same direction, right? I'm staying like a couple steps behind him. We both walk out of the garage. We walk across the street. We both walk into the building. We both walk into the elevator, up to the theater. And then he just looks at me and goes, "Mission Impossible? Yep. 2:15? Yep." And he was worried that the theater might have been sold out. And I was like, no, no, don't worry. There's plenty of tickets. I bought my tickets a couple hours ago because it wasn't a sold out theater, but it did get to about, I'd say half full. By the time we were there, that was interesting. I didn't think there were going to be that many people there like before it closed the business on a Friday, especially going into the Memorial Day weekend. I figured a lot of people would have already been gone for, their trips, up north or to the lake or to family or whatnot for the weekend. But the thing that he told me, he was like, "This movie's almost 3 hours long." And I was like, "What?" Because I didn't know that. I actually did not look at the runtime before going into that film. And yeah, it's 2 hours and 49 minutes. I was like, well, damn. All right. This is going to be an epic finale. And yeah, it was. It was really, really epic. I mean, job well done. Seriously. Like, the Mission Impossible franchise, I mean, it's almost like the antithesis of the MCU in the sense that, instead of 36 movies in a 17-year period, it's 8 movies in a 30-year period, right? Almost 30 years, right? 1996 is when the first Mission Impossible movie released. That's 29 years ago, right? Because the 30th anniversary of Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible franchise will be next year. And it's crazy to think that there's like at least 1 or 2 whole generations that don't even know this was a TV series beforehand, right? They have no idea that Ethan Hunt and everybody else, this tape will self-destruct in 5 seconds, was a TV show back in the 60s, way before it became a Tom Cruise mega action spy franchise. And I saw a posting earlier today on Threads that said, if you disagree with somebody's like ranking for Mission Impossible movies, just know that there are like over 42,000 other combinations and like all of them are valid, something to that effect or whatnot. Like everybody has a different hierarchy for the 8 Mission Impossible movies that we have seen that have been released. And whatever the hierarchy is, they're all valid. And of course, that's the epitome of it's all subjective. But this is a franchise that consistently through 8 movies has not let me down. Not even the second one. And I know that's the one that a lot of people like to crap on, Mission Impossible 2. But here's my issue with people that crap on Mission Impossible 2. It's a John Woo film. Do you know who John Woo is? If you don't know who John Woo is, Google him. I imagine that if you're listening to this podcast, you know on some level who John Woo is. And I don't need to tell you his filmography, but I'll just list the two films that are probably most well known. I mean, he's got a whole catalog, right? But the two films he's most well known for in our circles are more than likely Hard Boiled and Face Off. Yes, the John Travolta, Nick Cage Face Off movie. That's John Woo, okay? So just if you've seen either of those movies, remember that style of action. Remember how, like a ballet, and how implausible and how ridiculous and how stylized it is. And then remember that that's the guy that directed Mission Impossible 2. And seriously, shelve all of your shitty comments about it. Because that's exactly why that movie is the way that it is. And if you understand that, and if you know that that's a John Woo film, then you should be able to accept how it goes. That's all I'm saying, subjectively speaking, in that regard. But I remember that was the first one that I saw in theaters. The only Mission Impossible movie I have not seen in theaters is the first one. Because the first one, I wasn't introduced to. I mean, obviously, like in '96, I knew that the movie had come out, but I didn't see that movie until it was a Christmas gift, a VHS Christmas gift for me. And I watched it Christmas Day. That was the first time that I watched it because I was like, "Ooh, this movie looks cool. All right, let me check this out." It's the only one I haven't seen in theaters. I've seen every other Mission Impossible film in theaters, and none of them have disappointed me whatsoever. They have all been good to great. I think the third film is still my favorite, but Final Reckoning was really good. It was a nice send off. It was a nice continuation from Dead Reckoning Part 1. I don't know if they're going to rename that title or how they're going to do it, whatever. If they make another steelbook of it, fine. I'll switch that one out for switch the one I have out for that one if they change the title. Whatever. But I've said before and I've told people, and I know Sam was disagreeing with me a little bit on Threads because they were talking about how, they there was a discussion like they didn't like someone making a comment about how the franchise really started with the third film. And I understand people that say the franchise started with the third film. Sam disagreed because Sam didn't want to discount the first and second films. And I hear Sam on that. Sam, I totally hear you on that. I absolutely agree. And it's funny because without giving away any spoilers, because I'm going to keep this one spoiler free for people who haven't necessarily watched it yet, the first one is referenced rather heavily, way more than I thought it was going to be in this film. To be fair, almost all of them, with the exception of the second one, hilariously, are referenced in this film. It really does feel like a send off, like, hey, we're celebrating the franchise. This is our last go at it. This is our swan song. It does feel like that at times. So, yeah, you want to include all eight. All eight are definitely part of the conglomerate, if you will. But all I meant is I understand if people say that tonally speaking and, structure wise, the franchise found its footing with the third film. J.J. Abrams set the tone. That's when he brought in Simon Pegg to be Benji. That's really when the style of cinematography and the way that they put things together and how the IMF operated. That's also the one that introduced Julia, his wife, right, for a little bit. Like that movie like is where it's almost like the third season of a show, right? Like it's Star Trek, it's Trekkies, my Trekkies out there, okay, Amr, right, and Alex and other Trekkies out there, longtime Trekkies, you know what the rule is, right, with respect to Star Trek series, largely speaking, with the older ones, right, not necessarily with the ones on Paramount Plus. The rule was always what? Get to the third season, because the first two seasons of TNG are rough. The first two seasons of DS9, a little rough. And maybe even the first two seasons of Voyager, depending on who you talk to, a little rough, right? All of those shows found their footing in season 3 and we're off to the races after that, right? Like that's our, perception for a lot of us with Star Trek. It's the same with Mission Impossible. Treat the third film as though it's season 3, right? But in this case, it's not like 1 and 2 are rough. No, they're not rough films. I enjoy the entirety of the franchise. It's just you will see a consistent tone and you will see a consistent structure from J.J. Abrams' film through Brad Bird's film Ghost Protocol and certainly through the McQuarrie films, which is what Rogue Nation all the way to now, right? McQuarrie has taken over this franchise. He's done a phenomenal job. He and Cruz have done an outstanding job on the back end of these 8 films, and I've enjoyed every last one of them. It's been a nice escalation. I have nothing bad to say really about the cast. Yeah, Cruz is Cruz, and it's even crazier when you look at all the shit that he does in this movie and realize, oh, he did most of that for real, if not all of it for real. And quite frankly, the air stuff that we see in the trailers and the TV spots is crazy enough, but there's also some stuff involving water that I'm like, you are an absolute psychopath if you did any of that for real, right? Like, just saying. Like, for those of you that have seen the film, holy shit. Like, there's some stuff in this movie. And that's the thing, 2 hours and 49 minutes, what could they possibly do? Well, there's a good amount of exposition, but it's not boring exposition. It's like setups for, okay, here's the impossible mission that they have to undertake. And I think almost more than any of the other movies, this one really hits home the idea of the impossible mission, because damn near everything that they do in this movie is flippin' impossible. Like, so many times, like multiple times in the movie, Ethan will explain a plan and like somebody will go, "That's your plan? You think that's gonna work? Are you insane?" Something to that effect, right? And he's just like, "Well, we'll work it out as we go." That type of deal. And it's thrilling. It's a joy to behold. It's a lot of fun. If you are a fan of this franchise, you will not be disappointed. It is a great swan song / send off. Could they make another one after this? Yes, they could. It does not quite have the finality of, say, a No Time to Die, which is a movie I still haven't seen, but I am aware of how it ends. That was a spoiler that unfortunately I could not avoid. It is what it is with respect to that. At some point, I'll watch it and I'll do a flight review episode on it. But no, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning does not end in a similar fashion. If Cruise and McQuarrie wanted to, they could do another one. Sounds like they're going to do Top Gun 3 first, because McQuarrie recently, he was talking to Josh Horowitz on his Happy Sad Confused podcast, talked about more than a few things, and that was one of the things that I guess that came out was that he's figured out what they're going to do for Top Gun 3, because of course he directed Top Gun Maverick, which phenomenal movie, and it's amazing that now it's the Top Gun franchise, right? Like, Top Gun for decades was just one movie, and now it's a franchise. It's like, hey, what else is Cruise gonna do with all these stunts and all the fighter planes as Pete Mitchell, aka Maverick? Yeah, it's, I don't know, but either way, fantastic film. Had a lot of fun watching it. I mean, visually speaking, outstanding. I also love the score. I wanted to point out really briefly, like, these are two composers that I've never heard of, brand new names. Max Arouge and Alfie Godfrey. I hope I pronounced Max's last name properly in that regard, but I guess they took over for Lauren Balfe, and they did a phenomenal job. I really, really dug the score for this film, and music is a big thing for me with respect to scores in films, and yeah, I thought they did an outstanding job, truthfully, as far as scoring this film, and that's a Herculean task, right? To follow up, some of the greats, whether it's Lauren Belfi, or whether it's Michael Giacchino and the work that he did for the franchise, and some of the other composers that have worked on this franchise. Like, it's Danny Elfman, of course, he did the score for the first Mission Impossible film. Yeah, I mean, just they did a great job, and the music for this film, the tone and the setting of this film, and just all the setups and everybody involved. I mean, fantastic. Just really, really well done. The character that they brought back, if you will, from the older movies was in the film a lot more than I thought they were going to be, and it was a really awesome callback. I really enjoyed that, so that was really good. But yeah, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, just briefly, really good. I don't know where I would rank it quite so in the 8 films. I certainly wouldn't rank it last in that regard as far as preference. Maybe one of these days I'll think about a ranking. 3 is still my favorite as far as the one that really, I think, set the tone for the back end of this franchise, like from movie 3 on, if you will. But no, they're all good. The entire Mission Impossible franchise is good. I've already got the 4K Steelbook pre-ordered. I'll add it to the other 7 that I have. And yeah, no, just really, really good. Really well done. Really enjoyed it. The only other thing I wanted to talk about this particular week that came up was Zack Snyder related. 2 Zack Snyder related pieces of information. First was the Jim Lee photo, which that was awesome, because here, let me go ahead and pull up the goodness here, because Jim Lee, of course, is on Threads, and he is active, if you will, and he posted on Memorial Day, or I guess the day before Memorial Day. It's a picture of him and Zack Snyder himself. He says, Memorial Day weekend off to a strong start. Always good running into the maestro, Zack Snyder. And he's got like several of the hands up emojis. And first of all, it's just great to hear and to see Jim Lee call Zack Snyder a maestro. That's always fantastic. I love that because the anti-Snyders just, oh, their blood boils when they see that, right? Because the other great thing about this is it, thoroughly annihilates these narratives that there's this animosity between Zack Snyder and the brass at DC. No, Jim Lee and Zack Snyder they're in good graces, seriously. And for all of the comic creators and all the comic artists that have just, absolutely taken aim and laid waste to Zack Snyder, all the gatekeepers and all the bigoted pieces of shit, all the giant freaking robot collaborators and everybody that just, wants to continuously say stupid shit about Zack Snyder because they're so mad at what he did to Superman for them and how he destroyed their childhoods. And, it's just jealousy, as I've said many times, number one, because he got to play in a sandbox that, they were never nearly revered for as much and never got their hands on, truthfully. So it's envy in that regard. But, for all of those, weak-willed, snowflakes, if you will, to coin that phrase, Jim Lee has been the exact opposite. He's been a model of class, and he's, a stronger artist, I think many people would agree, than many of those others that, tend to spew their bile at Zack Snyder. Chief creative officer at DC Comics and a publisher, right? So certainly still active and considered, one of the greats, if you will, by many of us. And I'm not certain if I've read any books that he has illustrated. I need to. That absolutely they are on the list. But of course, I also have the artwork, the copies of Man of Steel, the Steel books that I have for Man of Steel and Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition are his artwork. They are, right, the covers that he drew for those. So that's awesome in that regard. But, for him to be such a class act always with Zack Snyder, I love that, dispelling these myths and these narratives, right? Knowing full well, what's on the horizon, right? To see this respect for Zack Snyder, we've seen it from James Gunn multiple times, and now we're seeing it from Jim Lee. That's always awesome. I love tearing down bullshit narratives from the anti-Snyder crowd. That's fantastic. Here's another one. And this came from Dave the Film Junkie. I found this out because he posted this in his Patreon the other day. I am still a member of his Patreon. I wonder if he knows that. I think he does. But either way, he posted a video the other day. It was referencing a tweet over on that hell site, Twitter/X, that was posted, let's say, a little over a week ago from an account by the name of Tom MCJL. I guess this person is affiliated with Hollywood Handle, Pop News, Nexus Point News. They sound like a lot of Scooper Madness to me, but either way, he did post this, and this did catch, Dave did do a video on this. He said, exclusive, Zack and Scott Snyder's Justice League comic would have explored the detailed scapes of Apocalypse and Darkseid's history. While things ultimately stalled due to busy schedules, it's something Scott would still like to do. Zack's already affirmed he's open to it. And that's it. That's the entire tweet. Now look, this isn't like exclusive news. This is not anything, confirmed. And this is something that has come up before. This is something that has been bandied about because Scott Snyder himself has talked about this. Now Scott Snyder, there's a lot of his stuff that I have not read, but there is some that I have read, including his Batman run that he did with Greg Capullo that I think includes Death of the Family. Like, I have read that. It's been a minute. I should probably reread it, but I have read that before. So I am familiar with Scott Snyder's work, not nearly as much as many of you are, but in that vein, enough of it to get an opinion, to have an opinion for his writing and storytelling in that regard, at least on a basic sense. There's more of his stuff that I need to read. But either way, this idea of him doing the Snyderverse as comics, in comic form, him working with Zack Snyder. First of all, I love the alliteration, the Snyders working together on a Snyderverse comic, if you will. But beyond that, like this idea, the exploration of the detailed scapes of Apocalypse and Darkseid's history, right? This is something that I dearly hope happens and something that I am most certainly rooting for a number of reasons, not the least of which because those of us that are rational fans of the DCEU and the Snyderverse, we know that this is the logical choice. This is the logical step, right? The only other thing that they could do close to live action, which won't happen, live action's over, live action is dead. There will not be any live action continuations of the Snyderverse. It's too far gone for that. It was too late, truthfully. It was like 3 or 4 years late. at the time that Zack Snyder's Justice League was released. It's even later now in 2025. It's been 8 years since Justice League, almost 8 full years since Justice League was theatrically released, sadly, and that was when we went off track. So there's really no way of making that up in a live action sense. But other than an animated form, comics are the way to go. And quite honestly, comics, you can do so much more. Comics can be so much more expansive because the budget is so much lower. You've already got one of the heralded titans of DC Comics that wants to do this, wants to flesh this out, wants to tell this story with Zack Snyder, right? Like, and he's accomplished in his own right, and again, is one of the top tiers, right? Put him right up there with Jim Lee in many cases, right? And he wants to do this. Like, this would be amazing. This would be fantastic. We could get a Snyderverse continuation in the comics. That mission accomplished as far as I'm concerned. And with respect to everything that has happened, with the Snyderverse. And that's a book that we would all buy. It's a book that we would all read, those of us that are fans, and it's a book that we would all enjoy and herald. And that would be like resolution and completion for us, right? Even more so, like further continuing the resolution that we got from the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League, right? Because that's where I sit with this. I don't I don't wallow in the what we could have had and what could have been. I don't do that, right? Like, to me, having that trilogy in physical form in my library is, that's my victory. That is what I appreciate. That is what I enjoy. That is what I relish. And if Scott Snyder, one of the titans of DC Comics, were to continue this storyline, were to continue that Earth in comic form with Zack Snyder, bring it on. Bring it on. I will read the hell out of it. I would review it here. Those flight report episodes would be topside. Those wouldn't be just for Patreon. I would absolutely read the new stuff here and enjoy all of it. And we'd all talk about it. I mean, it might even be an opportunity and occasion to get a lot of us over at Squadcast Media back together, because I know Scott would read it. Tim would read it. Jordan and Chris would read it. Like, 5 of the 6 of us would read it. That's for sure. I'll say that much in that regard. But it'd be great. It'd be fantastic if this could actually happen. How close it is to actually happening, I don't know. But if Snyder's willing to do it, and at that point, because think about this, right? If we're talking about licensing, if we're talking about DC characters and whatnot, well, then you would need the blessing of perhaps the chief creative officer of DC, who called him a maestro recently. Yeah, so there you have it. Jim Lee and Scott Snyder both being in Zack Snyder's corner makes this even more of a possibility as far as I'm concerned. And nothing is confirmed. It's all just, hey, this is what they wanted to do. But I would love it, and I think many of us would love it if they continued this. And short of the alternate reality where the live action movies, the DCEU, is allowed to continue the way it was originally planned, this would be great resolution for us. I think this would be something that we can enjoy, sink our teeth into. And obviously, there's always going to be that feeling of, wow, this would be great to see this in live action, but at least the story would continue, and at least that Earth would be allowed to live on, even in the specter of what James Gunn is doing with the DCU in that regard. And hopefully that succeeds. An opportunity for both universes to thrive and succeed at the same time, because we know James Gunn has absolutely, he's been all about, had the comic creators, had Snyder and Lee and everybody on the set of Superman, and, Tom King and others, right? And he's made it a point, more than any other studio head, even more than Feige, certainly more than Feige over at Marvel Studios, he's made it a point to connect his films and what he's doing cinematically to the source material, to the comics. He's a student of the source material. So that if this project actually happened, that he would support it, and he would absolutely be like, hey, check this out, because he wants the DC brand to succeed. And I firmly believe that with the stuff that he's posted, in terms of the history of DC Comics, in terms of the DC logo, the fact that he made the DC logo the bullet logo, which, has been the classic favorite for many DC fans, this would be something that he would promote. This would be something that he would absolutely be on board with. And yeah, I hope it happens. I don't know when, I don't know how or how close they would be to it, but yeah, I absolutely, fingers crossed that this happens, man. That'd be absolutely fantastic if we get some Snyderverse comics, and like Dave was saying in his video, maybe even that can extend to the possibility of seeing the Justice League sequels in comic form. Yes, absolutely, I would take that. 1000% I would take that. Absolutely. And I think many of you would agree with me on that. Hopefully you would, because that's where we're at with respect to that. But that would be an amazing story if we could see the DCU succeed cinematically, and then the Snyderverse also succeed on the page simultaneously at the same time. That'd be great. That'd be fantastic. And it would really give us rational fans something to hang our hats on and latch onto while we watch both cults burn in effigy because the anti-Snyders can't get rid of the Snyderverse, and the Snyderverse is continuing in comic form, which burns up all of the Snyder cultists that, are like, movies are bust, those irrational, delusional humps. Yeah, anything that helps us out and makes us happy and makes both of the cults unhappy, I'm in favor of. And this would definitely do both. So, absolutely. Here's hoping. Fingers crossed. Let's see it happen. And that's all I've got this week for a somewhat uncharacteristically briefer episode of the Flightcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting theflightcast.com. If there's anything that you want to talk about that you think I might have missed this week, or if you want to talk about anything that I brought up, I know a few of you did send emails about Mission Impossible, so we'll definitely talk about that in Flight Chat this upcoming weekend. But if you want to talk about the Snyderverse comic stuff, or if there's anything else that you want to chat about, movies, TV, and other sort of media related, and you want to send more emails in addition to the ones that you sent last week, or if you didn't send one last week and you want to send one in this week for Flight Chat, you know where to find me on Threads and Instagram at the Flightcast, on Blue Sky at Flightcast. There's also the Flightcast YouTube channel that you can post underneath the posting for this particular episode. There's the Flightcast Facebook page, and of course I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, have a great week, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.